Hello, trading is closed on Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. We always do our disclaimer, go over our calls, and make our predictions. It's my trading plan for Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. Please remember my calls can be wrong. Trade at your own risk. Look for the pattern with the early high. We'll go over why I'm calling it early high instead of early low in just a minute. Tomorrow it should also have the early high. We looked for a gap opening and a prompt move outside yesterday's range. We got that. Well, I guess we missed by a few pennies. Can't win them all. But we got the gap opening, sharp gap down. And we had some targets. One target was 58.80, 0.83. That one printed. We also got the higher target, 58.99.17. Now, when you gap down smartly, this price remains on the table, but not the time. It doesn't mean it won't print today, just that I'm not saying when it does print. And it's good it printed today. Larry Williams' rule called for a rally, but that didn't mean we had to gap up. It didn't mean we had to close up. But we didn't gap up. We did get the rally, and we did close up. This is just a reminder of what we said. During the day, MEJT said this was a false move or rallying all day, so it won't stick. We're going to undercut that white line, and we did, so that's played out. And why am I calling this early high instead of early low? I mean, the early low's at the right time. This high's at the right time. It sure looks like an early low pattern. And frankly, if this were all I had to look at, I might call it that too. The thing is, there is leeway on these times. This is about as early as you can start to move up from the early low. This is about as late as it'll finish, and when you start early, you're supposed to finish late. It doesn't break any rules if you call this early high. Now, these patterns repeat every 32 days, and the reason I'm calling this the early high pattern is there is a consolidation at this time which usually breaks higher, if that's the right idea, and it did break higher. And if you look at some previous days, you get, after a couple of hours trading, you get a consolidation and then break higher, and then consolidation, break higher. Consolidation here, that's a kind of a break higher, yeah. I like to tell you that it always works perfectly, it just doesn't. I mean, you could say that's a break higher, but I'm not too impressed. If that's all I had, probably is not how I'd call it. And you did break higher from this. There's a leeway when this thing ends, you break higher. It's because of that break higher that I'm calling it the early high, but there is overlap in 32 calendar days from now when this pattern returns. I'm going to still call it the early high with a question mark and say it can be it's not a standard pattern, it can be an ambiguous pattern, because if it isn't really clear, if it can be counted either way, it's not going to help me when I'm trading. And I've gone back for a lot of these every 32 calendar days. A lot of them you can really count either way, and even though I think that's the right interpretation, not something I'd bet the family heirlooms on. Anyway, tomorrow is a pattern with the early high as well. But that's why I'm calling it. This is as early as it can start, early as it can early as it can end, and you're supposed to get a rally after that. If this is a low, and this low doesn't have to be lower than this high. Well, tomorrow's pattern has the early high regardless of where we open. Typically it's a bearish day with a low in the final hour, but if it's strong, it should see more strength. There's an optional MEJT target at a much lower level. I mean, quite a lot lower, 58.64.25. That's over 50 handles. It's going to print in a large majority of cases, just not guaranteed to print. And if it doesn't, we'll forget it. Now, Monday's pattern was weak. When that's weak, you see more weakness at some time, and usually you don't have to wait too long. that hasn't been satisfied yet. So these factors argue for lower prices printing tomorrow. But the call isn't a lock, and if we gap up sharply, it kills the idea before the open. So I'm going to say there's a good chance that we follow through on this pattern, which usually leads to lower prices. There's a good chance it happens tomorrow, but by no means is it a guarantee. And I'm flat overnight, and I'm going to wait to see what happens in the early trade before I risk any money on it. If I'm right, I mean, that's a long way down. I don't know what futures are doing. Let me see. Futures are actually up 6. So, don't know. But for right now, I think the odds favor down, but it's not a lock. It's the pattern with the early high, and that's today's call.